Sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to him, "Abraham." "Here I am," he replied. Then God said, "Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you." Early the next morning, Abraham got up and loaded his donkey. He took with him two of his servants and his son Isaac. When he had cut enough wood for the burnt offering, he set out for the place God had told him about. On the third day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. He said to his servants, "Stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go over there. We will worship, and then we will come back to you." Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and placed it on his son Isaac, and he himself carried the fire and the knife. As the two of them went on together, Isaac spoke up and said to his father Abraham, "Father?" "Yes, my son," Abraham replied. "The fire and the wood are here," Isaac said, "but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham answered, "God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." And the two of them went on together. When they reached the place God had told him about, Abraham built an altar there and arranged the wood on it. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then he reached out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. But the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham." "Here I am," he replied. "Do not lay a hand on the boy," he said. "Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son." Abraham looked up, and there in a thicket he saw a ram caught by its horns. He went over and took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called that place, "The Lord will provide." And to this day it is said, "On the mountain of the Lord it will be provided." And this is the word of the Lord.
Because the Lord is my shepherd, I have everything that I need. He lets me rest in meadows green and leads me beside the quiet stream. He keeps on giving life to me and helps me to do what honors him the most. Even when walking through the dark valley of death, I will never be afraid, for he is close beside me, guiding all the way. He spreads a feast before me in the presence of mine enemies. He welcomes me as his special guest, with blessing overflowing, and goodness and unfailing kindness shall be with me all of my life, and afterwards I shall live with him forever, forever. In his home, forever in his home, forever in his home.
Now, the title of my message is the Lord will provide. Let me ask you something. How far would you trust someone before you needed an explanation? Most of us have a limit. We follow instructions at work up to a point. We'll take a doctor's order or advice, but we want the reasons first. We trust people when we can see the logic. But what do you do when the logic just disappears and all you have is the relationship? And this is where Abraham stood. Today, the text takes us to a place very challenging. A mountain in the land of Moriah, a father and a son, a 3-day journey into the most difficult thing that Abraham ever faced. And I want to begin this morning with a perspective that has been overlooked before. We usually look at this text and say, this is a test of Abraham. But what if it's also the test for God? The very first announces it plainly. God tested Abraham. So we just want, I've heard many times preach this before, but God does not want us to sacrifice our children. Literally or figuratively, okay? It's right in the beginning. God tested Abraham, so it's not, okay? Thank you. Something else is going on. And what is that going on? So before we figure that out, we need to understand what a test means in the Bible. When we hear the word test, we think of like evaluation, pass or fail, to know if you're good enough. But in the Old Testament, a test mainly means two things. One, it's a process by which character forms. Two, this is the thing that we're talking about. It makes visible what God has already deposited in you. And here I believe this is a text that is about the revelation of both God's and Abraham's characters. We have teachers here, we have former teachers here. In earthly situations, you are tested because schools, workplaces, and institutions want to know if you have what it takes. But in the kingdom context, tests build you. And one of the main things that what that test does, it reveals to you what valuable traits you have in the Lord. Psalm 66:10 says, "For you, God, tested us. You refined us like silver." There's dross and other impurities in that metal. If you have tests, revelation, refining, then that silver becomes brighter. So here's what I want you to understand this morning. On Mount Moriah, both Abraham and implicitly God was being tested or being revealed. And so the first question we have is, how is God being tested here? How is God's character revealed here? Well, God made a promise to Abraham. A specific, binding, a personal promise, a lineage, a future, a people as numerous as the stars. And then God issues a command that appears to totally contradict that promise completely. If Abraham obeys, the promise dies on the mountain. If Abraham refuses, the covenant relationship is broken. Either way, something is at stake with God, and not just for Abraham. So what was at stake for God? And this is what's at stake of God for all time, for us, all the time. Can we trust God? Can we trust God? What kind of God is He? The command created a situation in which God's own character was online. And the resolution, the angel's voice, the ram in the thicket, the renewal of the covenant blessing was not just the rescue of Abraham. It was God's own answer to His own test. On that mountain, God demonstrated what kind of God He is. It was about God's faithfulness to us. The theologian Walter Brueggemann makes a point here I think it's very good for all of us to understand. He argues that what God provides on that mountain is not just a ram. That ram in the thicket is just a sign. What God actually provides is the future. Isaac lives, the covenant holds, the lineage continues, the promise moves forward. In this passage, we learn that God sees the future that we cannot see, and He is working towards it even when we are on the hardest part of the mountain, doubting, hesitating, not believing. Even when we don't know exactly what God is doing and where we're going, and we don't know how all this will turn out, God holds the future. The Lord will provide, Jehovah Jireh. That is what happened on Mount Calvary. The cross on Friday is just a sign, but it's not the final statement of God's declaration. The empty tomb on Sunday is a definitive revelation. The empty tomb says God holds the future. God prepared for us whatever we need beyond the cross on Friday. Many of us are nearing retirement or in retirement in the later years of our lives. And the quiet fear that we all have in this season is that the future is shrinking, smaller, not as vibrant as it was when we were in our 40s or 50s. That God's purposes for us is mostly behind us, and we've got nothing much to look forward to. But Abraham's journey to the mountain of Moriah says otherwise. Jehovah Jireh is not a word for the young and the able-bodied. God sees the future that you cannot yet see. You are not past the point of God's blessing and provision. God is faithful through the hardest and the most difficult parts of your life. God still has a wonderful future for you. And this is what Paul writes in 1 Corinthians. He says, no eye has seen, no ear has heard, no mind has conceived what God has prepared for those who love Him and are loved by Him. That's the promise. God's future for us is larger than anything we could see from where we are standing. The Lord will provide for us in the later years. Count on it. Have hope in it. Love every moment. Now let us ask, what character is being revealed in Abraham? He does not receive an explanation before he climbs, or during the climb, or at the top. He simply walks, even though he cannot see a way out. I feel the weight of this walk. 3 days with the person he loved most, walking beside him. 3 days of his son's voice, his son's questions, his son's trust, his son's wonderful presence. And at the same time, no word from God. about how this will end. And this is what I find it remarkable. The hardest place is not just where God resolves things for you. The hardest place are the places where God reveals himself the most. Because this is difficult for us because we want the explanation before the obedience. We want to see the ram before we take the first step. This is not the way the story works. The revelation doesn't come before the mountain. It comes on it. And this is what's revealed in Abraham. This is what we know about Abraham. The man who comes down is not the same man who went up. Not because the mountain changed him, but because the hardest walk of his life showed him what God had built in him for all those years. You'll never know until you come to the hardest points. Faithfulness was already in Abraham, growing for decades, became visible when he obeyed in the darkest moment. So most of us think that testing is punishing. God is watching. If we measure up, the hard place is, can we perform good enough to pass? And if I fail, something will be withheld. I will not get God's promises. That kind of understanding of testing will only produce fear, doubt, not faith. So most churches, most Christians will not go forward to the hard mountain of Mount Moriah. But our text nudges us towards God, towards Mount Moriah, towards greater faith, greater trust, greater love, and greater hope. I spoke to the older generation before, and I want to speak to the younger generation. The ones heading into summer breaks, into college, into careers, into starting a family. You are at the bottom of a mountain that you never climbed before. And most of you want to see the ram before you make that trek. You want to know how this story will end. Well, that's not a character flaw. That's not you being weak-minded Christian. That's just human character. That's just all of us. But here's what I want you to hear from this passage. You already have what you need in order to go to the mountain. Not because you have prepared well enough, or studied hard enough, or figured out the right path, but because the God who provided for Abraham on that Mount Moriah is with you today. Jehovah Jireh. Remember what the Psalm 66 says. God refines silver not to destroy what is there, but to reveal the best of you. Abraham did not know the depth of his faithfulness until the mountain required it. You will not know yours until your difficult journey reveals the treasures in you. You will see it because God already deposited them in your life. And your Mount Moriah is this: choosing the hard work of building community, serving society, protecting families and friends, practicing justice and mercy, practicing your faith with honesty and joy, loving your neighbors as yourself, and even loving enemies that want to destroy you. Those are your Mount Moriahs for your future. But I want to urge you, keep climbing the Mount Moriahs. because the Lord will provide. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thanks for joining us. If you're interested in visiting us in person, we are at the corner of Liberty Meeting Court and Sugarland Road. Look forward to seeing you soon.